All right, so we're going to pick up where we left off last night and wrap up our channel API. And then I've also pulled some kind of odds and ends that we discovered last night to kind of reduce the load on a stream in the future. So what we have left to do on the channel API itself is build the ability to join and leave channels, and also to list the channels that you're currently in or users currently in. Before we do that, because that's going to be the bulk of tonight, before we do that, we'll go ahead and knock out some of these other odds and ends. So, your channel names must be unique and required to create a channel. So, there's a couple of different ways we could do the unique thing. The most straightforward is just going to be to make that, put an index on the name field in the channels database or channels table and just make it unique. Then if that fails, then we'll catch an exception, bubble up properly and say, channel name already taken. That's the, I'm going to put my logic in my specific database type setup. The other way would be to actually write out logic in the factory method for creating a channel. So we'll probably do both. But the more, I guess, correct would be to do that logic in the model, because it is kind of a business rule, and we want all those rules to be kind of coagulated, coalesced there. So that said, let's open up the model, and basically what needs to happen is we just very early do a check during creation to whether or not that channel exists or not, or the channel we're attempting to create exists or not. And the idea is we fail fast. So the way I like to structure methods is I'll have some like guard clauses at the beginning of the method that if I hit one of those guard clauses, I throw an exception. Otherwise, I just let it flow down. So I don't do things like let me run a query and then have a giant if else, and if we're good, do this, else do that. It's more like if we're not good, bail. Otherwise, flow. So anyway, we'll say const. We'll just call it channel for now. I really want this to be like explicit. This is the channel that already exists or whatever. Where name is equal to name. So if channel, so if it exists, then we're going to throw a error message and say channel with name already exists. Choose another name. Let's just keep it simple. It's just the error message itself. We'll leave it at the front end to like suggest a call to action on what they could do to correct this issue. So with this, we shouldn't be able to create two channels that have a name anymore. It's kind of guarded by the logic of this create factory. Now, we'll have to remember when we implement an update function that the same rule applies. So I think I'm going to have kind of a mega stream. We've got a mega stream focused on just testing, and we're going to come back in here and write tests for all these models. But when we do that, we'll also have to build some test utilities for dealing with like staging the database and getting it into a known state, running the tests, and reverting back to the previous known like blank state. So that's the only reason last stream or when we started all this, I didn't go ahead and hop into that because I wanted to focus on just the feature, not, all of those moving pieces as well. And that's mostly just to scope the content a little bit better. So we're going to have a stream that is just focused on testing at some point in the near future that we go through and do all of that. So anyway, here's our logic there. Let's go actually play with it. Now, when we do get to write those tests, a lot of this like poke it with a stick that we're doing with Insomnia, we'll just stop doing. We'll write tests, and as long as it's green, we trust everything's good. There's no need to actually go out and run it by hand. All right. Let's see. Got another projects containers running. Okay. So now I should be able to log in. Use whack. Select all from channels. And let's go ahead and get rid of this channels, the contents of the channel table, so now it's empty, since we already have this duplicate channel in there. So the first thing is we need to log in and get our token. The first thing is we need to actually start the back end, so we'll do that first. Once we get our console log that it's listening, we can log in. All right. And now we'll create a channel. So we're going to create whack.dev. Cannot access a name before initialization. So let's go back and see what we're doing. So that hasn't been initialized yet. So we need to just push that up to the top. And then try again. Okay, so it created that. Now if we do this again, we should get an error message. Channel with whack.dev already exists. Perfect. So now we can come in and be like, okay, well, I'm going to create a general channel, and this should work, and it does. So we're good. So we can mark this off the list, go ahead and commit and get our branch settled. So we'll exit here, get check out season 1, episode 6, wrapping up channel API. Request, new pull request. So we'll say channel name is unique. And there's actually, before we push this, let's go ahead and write our migration and make the actual column unique as well. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I think we already did this. No, we didn't. So this is basically, we'll write a migration that just adds that unique key here. So connects, migrate, make, channel name is unique. Connects schema, alter table, channels table. And then we're going to say table unique name. And then on the downside, you do drop unique name. And then make sure this runs. And I trust that it ran, but we'll actually log in and see. So describe channels, and we see that it does have a unique key now. So we're good. Now we can come back and amend that commit and push that up. All right, cool. So now we come back to the project. We've already moved that over. Cool. The next thing was last night we made the archive function actually remove the channel from the table, and we don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is set an archived at field on the record, and then modify our other query methods to respect that new field. So the first thing is we need to make a new migration. So we'll add archived at to channels. Wait, connect schema, alter table, channels, table, and then we'll say this is a I want to say date time, but we're going to double check this before we actually do it. Basically, I want this to be the same as this timestamps function. However, it makes these. So I think this is, I think this makes it date time. Let's go double check that though. So connects timestamps schema builder. So as created, setting each to date time types. So that's what we'll do. So we're good there. And we're going to drop column archive that. Trying to think if it should be indexed. I'll go ahead and throw an index on it. Because we are going to be writing queries that query this, but we're specifically going to be looking for records where this is null. So I don't know if that'll actually hit the index or not, but it ain't gonna hurt. Comes at the cost of storage. So we'll migrate up. Now we have that archive that. So something else that I just thought of is I get kind of like OCD about how the fields are organized in a database. So like imagine we had the other timestamp fields, so like created at and modified or updated at on here. I would want archived at to be after those. So after every other like relevant field, I like the IDs to be close to the beginning or whatever. So Connects gives us a way of doing that. You would basically, let's see, if I wanted this archive field to be after another field, I can just say after and put the field name here. So if I wanted to after rid, I could just say after rid, and it'll insert it right there. So that's how we do it. There's also a before, but that's there if you ever need it. So now we've got the archived at, and it should be null by default, and it is. So now let's come in and go ahead and modify our all and find by rid. So we're going to be looking for wait connects channels where, why isn't it auto completing? Why isn't it auto completing that? Whatever, we're not going to worry about it. I think there is like a where null archived at. And we'll just old school search here, where null. Yeah. So this will find all the ones that have not been archived yet. And then similarly down here, we'll have where rid ID or rid is rid and where null. So when you're working with the query builder, you can chain multiple wheres together and it'll just and these. If you ever have a time where you want to do something like where X and Y or Z or B or whatever, you can pass as a second argument a query, or a function, and you'll basically get a nested query builder inside of here that you could be like query or where poop or whatever you want to write. And I think there is actually there's a point we're going to need to do something like that. So we'll end up doing that. So we're archived at blah, blah, blah. This is set. We'll go ahead and just for giggles, make that consistent. And down here in archive, now instead of deleting, we want to update. So we'll say update. And I want to format this a little bit differently. We'll update archived at to be the current date. So there's a couple of different ways we can handle dates with our database. Your first, like your go-to, if you've been messing with JavaScript a while, you might go grab for moment.js and start using that. I'm starting to shy away from moment.js just because there's other libraries that are a little more a little more maintained. Moment itself is kind of they've announced they're deprecating that library. They have a forget what it's called, but it's like a lightweight version of Moment. But it's also Moment is kind of like this big giant globule of a library that especially in front-end projects eats up a lot of room in your bundle just because they store all these different locales and all this locale specific data. So oftentimes you're not supporting all of those locales, so you don't have to worry. You don't want all of that in your bundle. But anyway, date functions, when we use something, we'll probably pull that in. And then here I would use one of those date functions to get like the current date or whatever. I believe I can just pass an instance of the date, just the standard JavaScript date to connects, and it'll figure it out what it should be. So for this is good enough for us now. So let's see this in action and see if it works. So we'll select start from channels to see our current channels. We've got these, and both of them are archived null. So if I get all channels, I should see both of them, and I do. And if I show a specific channel, I should see that there. Now let's archive general. So it said 200 OK. If I look at get all channels, I don't see general anymore. And if I try to look at general again, I get an error. So we need to fix this. What should happen here is if there isn't a channel, we want to throw a 404 error. So a 404 status code. So we're going to end up implementing that here in this find by rid. Maybe we're going to do that. So there's two options. We can either say whenever I don't find a rid, this model throws an exception, which I'm a big fan of. The other way would be if find by rid, if it doesn't find one, it returns null, and then it puts the job on the controller to handle that null. So it's kind of a like, it doesn't really matter which way you go. If I say like I'm going to throw an exception here that captures some of that status code, so the fact that there is a 404 that I need to return, then what I'm saying is now my model is kind of polluted by this HTTP and API concern that it shouldn't be. It should be focused just on the app. But if I return null in some of my functions, but exceptions in others, now I have kind of this inconsistency or whatever. I'll also say for a solo project, none of this shit matters. So do whatever you want to do. But I'm more or less just saying it for, take this back to your job and These are the types of things maybe to think about. So we can do throw new error and then set like a status property on that. And our Express Open API validator's wired up to know if there's a status prop on there, I'll use that instead of sending this default 500 internal server error. I can also do throw and then just an object, because remember ES6 classes are just objects. So we could do something like this, where this channel is channel not found. So this would be our starting point. Let's see if this works first. Because it might not. We may need to adjust some things. So let's see. No schema defined for status code 404. So it's actually a good thing. We haven't this is basically saying in our Open API spec, we haven't said anything about a possible 404 response. So we'll go do that real quick. And then I'll continue my train of thought back over here. So let's open up Stoplight. Take a look at that. And it's opening very slowly. It goes. So over here on our get, I would come down here to add a response, and I would say this is a 400 or a 404. And this is going to be kind of our error structure that we use for everything. So there'll be like a response with a message property on it. We're going to end up probably duplicating this all over the place, and we'll probably like add a custom response here at some point and just say, oh yeah, this is the 404. We just point it to that. For now, I'm just going to put it here to get us, green again. So let's send this again. Channel not found. So this is good enough to keep moving, but imagine that we wanted to instead like have a message that this channel has been archived. Talk to your administrator, instead, or to find out more about it or whatever. All that would mean is that we would take this constraint off and do something like if channel archived at, then throw the appropriate error message, and then we have if not channel, that'd be our 404. So I'm not going to worry about that here. There's also an argument to be made if I archive a channel, then to a normal user it just shouldn't exist. So channel not found is the best error message you could give. So we'll go with this for now and just stick with our channel not found. So let's commit this. We also need to confirm that it's actually still in our database. So we'll do that real quick. Yeah, so see, this left the general channel in the database and just gives us a note about when it was archived. And again, it's 12:32 a.m. my time. This is in UTC. So everything in the database is always going to be in UTC. So that'll be important when we use a library like date functions or whatever, and we're like messing around with fields in the database. We just need to be careful and confirm that we're always storing UTC in the database. Moment was really bad about like if you just get a moment instance, it's going to use your locale and store that as the date, and then when you call formats on it, they're always formatted like that. You had to call like moment.utc to actually get a UTC moment instance. So All right. So we'll push this up, go back over to our Kanban, and now this is done. So the rest of this is going to be joining and leaving channels and adding our me endpoint for getting the user's current channels. So let's talk about that for a sec. And we'll talk about just the model itself. So we currently have a user model and a channel model. And you could imagine maybe we add a method to the channel object that's like join or add member or something like that, and it receives a user instance. And then that would create a row in some kind of join table or association table that related a user to a channel. I think that'd be fine. What's odd about that when you start thinking about like the object design is I'm sending a message to the channel, or I'm calling a method on the channel to join a user to that channel. And that feels awkward because it's an action the user is doing, not the channel is doing. So ultimately, you don't overthink this stuff too much. Like at the end of the day, we're literally just inserting a row into a table to relate a channel to a user. So it's not that big of a deal, but for more complex things, it is important to think about kind of what is the best model, like what's the best way of going about structuring this in our model. Another way I could think of it is like, you know, maybe we end up supporting channel invitations or something like that. So you would be able to type into a channel /invite in a user. That's something the user is doing, not necessarily a message you would send to the channel, like the channel object or whatever, to perform that action. So something I had thought about in a way I think I kind of want to go with this just to start is have a separate object that represents that relationship, and it'll encapsulate all the knowledge of that join table between the two. Because again, ultimately, that join table is the only thing that matters. It's going to be a table that has like at least 3 fields: ID, user ID, and channel ID, and it'll just like tie a user to a channel. I think I want to have that third object just to play around with the idea, because normally I would just like chuck the method on one of these 2 objects and just phone it in and call it a day and move on. So that's what I think we're going to do. So the next thing to think about is, what is that concept called? And my immediate thought is just channel membership. So it represents the who list, or like who is in a channel. So let's go ahead and create that to start. So we'll say channel membership, and we may change this later. We're going to go ahead and write the code and see how it feels, and just work from there. So we've got channel membership. Maybe I want to write code one day that is like, give me all the channels that a user is in. So it might be something like this, where I'm able to say, channels, give me channel membership by user, and I pass in a user ID or a username or something like that. And that would give me all the channels that a user is in. If I wanted to get all the users in a channel, then I might be able to say channel membership by channel, and that would be the channel name. So this thing would have kind of, I don't even think this would have instance methods on it, really. Maybe it would. Um, how do we want to do it? Channel membership. This is where like you start writing this out and be like, okay, so how do I join a channel? What does the messaging structure for that look like? So I have a couple of options. If I had a user instance, I could be like join channel, and then a join channel general. That'd be a fine way to do it. We could go back to the channel add member Dustin or whatever. If we stuck it here, we would have to say like channel membership. This I hate. This is absolutely terrible. Like create or whatever. Anytime I see like, I know we've done this on like the channel already, but that's like if you think about it, that's what you would say if you were creating a channel. So it just happens to be this crud name. But here, I feel like, this is a more appropriate domain term. This it starts feeling like a reach a bit. This is definitely more like what you would hear somebody say in your business or domain, whatever. So then leaving a channel might be leave channel general. This would be, channel remove member Dustin. And then same thing here, it'd be like, destroyed. So after typing this out, I almost feel like this is this feels like we're using the most common language. And then this feels a little more robotic. And then this is just straight up like, I mean, I might as well call this like insert into database or something like extremely technical. No one would ever say, create me a channel membership to join a channel. And I know we just said like we're going to do this channel membership thing, and we are, but this is I'm speaking out loud. These are the kinds of thoughts that are bouncing around my head as I'm going about designing these things. So I'm kind of like of the opinion right now, write this one just straight off. So if we did that, that would turn this into like an accessor, a read. It'd be a kind of an object with some static methods on it that's there to kind of like facilitate grabbing related objects to one another without us having to get an instance of a channel or a user to do this. So, because at the same time, you could also have like, if I had a user, I could have a function on it that's like called channels, and this would be the channels I'm in. And then the same thing here, I could have a .users that returns, an array of user objects. And this is a perfectly fine way of doing it. I'm breaking my own kind of norm. This would be my default, how it would do that. And then you would have like, those methods would have knowledge of the other database to be able to query. They'd have knowledge of the other model. I kind of want to keep them separate and then store that knowledge of both of them in a separate object for giggles to just see how it feels. So for now, let's start with these APIs and just see how far we go. So here we'll have static by user. This will take a user. So user ID. And then we'll have a static by channel that takes a channel ID. So this returns channels, and this returns users. Okay. And right now we'll just have these return empty arrays. Now, if we go over to user, we're going to add an instance method here for join channel. And this will be the channel name. And on channel, we'll also have a leave channel. And these will both kind of return void. They'll either work or they'll throw an exception. On the channel side, we aren't going to do anything. We're not going to do this. Okay. Reorganize these guys. All right, so what does it mean to join a channel? Here we've got, can I do this? No. Oh, wait. No, apparently. So here's our two tables. What we're going to do to represent the relationship, or to represent the fact that someone is in a channel, we're going to create a third table that captures the user ID and the channel ID. And itself, each row will have a unique ID so that we can specifically delete that relationship. It's kind of optional in this case because you could always have like your leave channel does a delete from that new table where the user ID equals blah and the channel equals blah. But yeah. So let's go write a migration to create that table real quick. So connects, migrate, make. There's a lot of different, let's say make user membership. So channel membership table. All right. So there's different naming conventions for these. You know, hear people call them like join tables or association tables, or whatever. A lot of your ORM frameworks will end up creating tables that are just like model underscore model, or like table name underscore table name, and that's it. So you might see like channel users, or user channels, or whatever. So we'll do something similar to that. So if we said let's go with this. So user channel association. I am kind of curious to like go look up what objection.js or Sequelize or Eloquent, which is Laravel's ORM, like what their defaults are. I should know it, but I just don't remember. This is just a drop table of that. Need all this. All right, so this is going to have an increments field called ID, and it's going to have a foreign key reference to the user ID, and then also to the channel ID. So here, this is basically the code we'll need to make that foreign key. So I'm just gonna rip that, and then we'll say this is user ID, this is channel ID. So user ID references ID and users. Channel ID references ID and channels. That should be it. So there may be additional fields we add to this in the future, like maybe those created at updated at timestamps would be useful to have so you know when a user joined a channel. Or left a channel. So if we ever wanted to support someone like tracking the fact that they were in a channel in a relational model like this, then we would have to implement something like a deleted at field or whatever and leave the row in the table. We're not going to do that right now, but we could. That'd be kind of the approach we'd take. But you know, if there are ever additional fields that describe this relationship of a user in a channel, then we'll add them here. I could almost imagine like channel specific notification settings might be stored on this relationship. Okay, so let's migrate up. We're good. So now we should have that table. There it is, in all of its glory. All right, so now we come back to this function, and we're kind of just gonna go at it, and then ideally without bringing in the channel model, I think. So this is just going to be one query that will run to do the update. And what we're going to find is that if this API is by name and we have to deal with IDs, then this method inside of user is going to need to know more about the channels table than it probably should if we're being like this model purist. But we're just going to let that slide in the interest of having a ergonomic API on the user object. This is another one of those things you could solve this by just moving the problem around and putting it over here, and now you can claim, oh well, channel membership needs to know about both schemas, you know, and now I feel better. But we're not going to do that. We may do that. I don't know. We can change our minds. Okay, so need to write our query. Say connects. I'm going to be inserting a row into this user channel association. So user channel assoc. And so what I need to be able to do is let's get as much out of our system as we possibly can. So user ID is going to be this.id. Channel ID is going to be a big fat I don't know. What needs to happen here is we basically run a query to get the channel ID. So there, I think, is a way to do this so that this ends up being one SQL query. So maybe this is a subselect that's part of this query. For right now, just to move forward, I'm going to run a separate query to just get the channel by name. So the channel record by name so that we can read the ID off of it. So that's important to call it like channel record because this is going to be the raw database information, not our channel model that we're dealing with. So I call it out as it's important to call this different because this is kind of going to be a sniff or a sniff test or signal that this model knows about another database that it probably shouldn't. So beware or whatever. In practice, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So we'll say await connects for the name. So we need to handle like what happens if this channel doesn't exist. So we'll say if not channel record, then throw new error. Channel name does not exist. So this right here is again another sniffy sniff that something we might be heading in a harder to maintain direction, because this behavior of not found is already kind of encapsulated in our channel model. We're not going to change a damn thing. We're going to keep on rolling. But these are the types of things, like as they happen, you should be thinking a little bit about it. But don't be paralyzed by that. The end goal is to write, get a user to get a row in this table again. And your users don't care how that happens. It's only when this type of stuff becomes kind of this, it builds this mountain up and up and up, that it starts to impede your ability to deliver features. And you end up needing to tell your user, oh no, I can't deliver that to you by this timeline because of shit technical decisions that I made months ago. And now I've buried myself. So here, I think this is it now. We've got our channel record, we get the ID off of it, and now we'll join. So leaving is basically just removing a row out of this. So what we can do is say, instead of insert, we'll say where the user ID is blah, and the channel ID is here, and then we'll say delete. We'll just fully delete that out of the database. And same thing here. We can do this in a subselect eventually. You'll basically, it'll be like either a subselect or a join. I don't even know if you can do an insert with a join, but we'll find out. You can definitely do this with a subselect. So now I should be able to join and leave a channel. So let's go, we've implemented our model functions. Let's go implement the actual APIs for this. So if we recall, we'll go back over to our spec. Joining a channel is going to be a post to this /channels ID join. And we're pointed, this endpoint is pointed at the channels controller, the join method, the join function on that object. So you collapse node modules. So inside controllers, we've got channels, and then we'll have a join export in here. And this is where we need to do our work, both of these functions. So what we'll do is I need to get an instance of the current user. So await user.find by, we'll do find or create. I don't really like find or create. Let's make a find by ID, because I never want someone just hitting this endpoint and just getting a magic user out of thin air. So this should be find by ID, and we just need to implement that function real quick. Find by ID. So a lot of this logic will be kind of the same. We'll do this, but we won't have this error case here. Well, we'll have that error case, but we'll do something different with it. So we'll throw a new error. User let's see. User does not exist. It's simple for now. I actually forgot we could do this syntax. We'll make this a little more verbose. But we could just have, we could do it similar to this, where username, field on the left, and then username on the right is our value for that. This is useful if you want to and like multiple conditions together. Instead of chaining multiple calls to well, you can just you can pass an object that is everything, and it'll chain all those. They basically have to meet all those different constraints. So if non-user or user not exist, otherwise we return the user. So now we should be able to come back to our channels API, find by ID. The user ID is going to be on our res.locals. So now we'll have that user, and we can say await user join channel. And we don't have the channel name. So let's go look that up in our spec. So we did not specify a request body, but what should be here is, we'll say it's an object, and you have to specify the channel name as part of that object. This could also be like, if we wanted to get fancy and allow someone to either pass name or ID if they have it, then what we could do is say this is one of, well, let's do it this way. You get, say, object. This one could be one of, oh, I'm messing this up. It's gonna be string. Basically, going to say it could be an object with either name or ID on it. We're going to stick with just name for now. And I'll get my shit together and figure out how to get this nested right. The unfortunate thing is, it's like, even if you do get that working right, it's still kind of confusing to read at a glance. So with that in place, we'll have a rec.body.name available if we make this required. So this is where it's kind of neat. Like, I can say this endpoint requires this object, and you have to pass a name. And now I don't need to do, error checking inside the controller and all of that, unless I want like a custom error message for that and a custom response for that. So there's times where you do both, but this is the time we won't do error checking that way. We'll just assume rec body name's always going to be there. And then we just need to send a response. It's not going to be a JSON payload or whatever. So then our leave is basically the same thing. We're just calling it a different instance method. So leave channel in the body name. So we'll come back to our spec here and add the body name, and it's required. So now let's go into Insomnia, and we'll add those endpoints. Let's call this, like, I'll rename it. Maybe some settings, yeah. Channel membership. And then we'll make a new request, join a join channel. It's gonna be a post request to our host, API, channels. We'll go find an ID and then join. So let's get all channels again. Wait is only valid in an async function. Where is that? Well, the first thing is we've got multiples of these running, so let's get ourselves straight. And for now, skip all these. Now I can do this. Let's run it again. And find out where we're hitting this issue. that's not us. I don't think this is us either. Yeah. Where did this pop up? Windows not defined, it's not us. That's so weird. So we'll just, I guess, have to find this ourselves. This is coming from, we're trying to use a way inside of a function that is not asynchronous, or not marked as async, and it's probably right here. So these aren't marked as async. I would expect that to throw an exception and actually point us to that fact, though. So that's kind of odd that it didn't do that, but that's probably just not the way it works. Let's try again. Without all this, continue. So now we have channels. Let's join this channel. We need the channel ID. So here's a good, here's a good thing. It's kind of wrong. Like, we don't really need the we don't need the name in the payload because we already got the ID by how we've structured our URLs or whatever. So let's backtrack a little bit and clean that up. So we don't need this body at all, nor do we need this one. What it does mean is we only have access to the ID currently. I'm almost wondering, like, if I were using this API, we know that the channel names are going to be globally unique. So technically those could be our URI. Like, those could be the IDs we use in the URLs. How about for now, we change these join channel and leave channel functions to accepted ID. And it's less ergonomic, but it does get rid of knowledge of that channel table altogether, because we'll just insert the ID here. And then same thing here. And I'll probably come back to this off stream and like make this completely different or like play around with something else. But this is kind of how it goes for me. So with this, we could just say params.id, reg.params.id, and reg.params.id. So let's roll with this for a little bit and see what happens. So anyway, I've got this ID. I can join like this, send. Let's see. Okay, so this is our RID. We still have to do a lookup for that. So let's come back over here. Let's call this out specifically as a RID. And then we're going to have to go back to the code we had a little bit. So let's say RID channel does not exist. RID channel does not exist. And then this stays the same. Try again. Okay. Did we get a row in our table? Select all from user channel assoc. We did. So now my one user is in that channel. Let's go make a new channel. And we'll call it birds. So this is the birds channel, and I'm going to join this channel now. join, and I see now I have user ID 1 in channel ID 3. So this is working. Now let's do our leave channel. So we'll just duplicate this, call it leave channel, and then we're going to send a request here to leave. And if I refresh, now that row's gone. So that's cool. So now we can join and leave channels. The next thing is server should be able to provide a list of channels the current user is a member or owner of. So let's come in here. I'm going to change this requirement up a little bit. I want this endpoint to be able to provide a list of channels that I am currently in. I can be the owner of a channel and then leave that channel, and I'm still the owner of that channel, but we're going to use this endpoint as like the channel list. So if I leave a channel, I don't want to see it on the list. I should be able to join it later through the browser, but that wouldn't be the API me channels endpoint. I would just go to API channels and search, and then rejoin that channel. So what we want to do right now is we don't even need this function. When we go to add like a /who command for our channels, we'll implement something like that. But we're going to keep it very, very razor focused or laser focused right now. So to get a list of all the users in a channel, I am going to need to run a query against our association table, join the user data, and then put that in a bunch of user objects to return it. I said that in reverse. I meant start with the user ID and return list of channels. So what we can do is say const channels equals await connects. We actually need to bring in our connects, and we'll rename this connects. So we'll await connects this table, and we're going to join. I really wish I understood why this is not auto-completing, because it totally should. Because if I come in here, let's see if it works here. Connection. Yeah, see, it's not working here, which is just annoying. Otherwise, we have to go to the documentation all the time, which is just no fun. I almost wonder if we need, I can't remember if we imported the types definitions for connects. So let's go look at our package.json and then look at dev dependencies. Sure enough, we don't have a types/connects. So let's see if adding that fixes our autocomplete woes. Okay, so this is an example of this package. Already, it provides type definitions as part of just the standard connects package. So this does nothing. And they just tell you it does nothing. It doesn't hurt anything, but it's probably not going to fix our autocomplete. Let's just punt this. We'll say figure out what's going wrong with connects utility IntelliSense. And I'll figure this out later. And maybe in this pull request, I'll do a write-up on like what I found and how I changed it or whatever. So for now, we're again pop over to Connect Stocks and rock it old school. So we want to do a join, and specifically, I want to do a left join. But I think for our purpose, it really doesn't even matter. So if I have a users table and I want to join accounts onto that, I could say left join table name, and then this would be your foreign like constrained ID, and then your local. Or I guess flip that. this would be, if I'm from users, then the left is my, it really doesn't matter, I don't think, because it's just going to change the order of this, and SQL doesn't care which one it is. But it's your two IDs that you're matching on, or you're joining on. So for us, we'll say join channels, and one of these will be channels.id, and the other will be user, channel ID, right? So when we do this join, if we don't have a select, then what it's going to do is it'll have the fields from both tables on it, which we probably don't want. So we'll end up doing syntax kind of like this, where it's like connects.select only the channels fields from here, and then that's good. You could also, where we had this like connects table name, I think this will do the same thing, you know. So it's a matter of opinion which one of those is more readable. Since this is the last thing I did, I'll just leave this here. But I guess the one nice thing about splitting it out and not doing this approach would be it reads more like a SQL query. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Something that is kind of useful, the Connects Query Builder has an as SQL or like to SQL function on it. I forget what it's called. Say to SQL. So yeah, it's to SQL that will print the SQL query that would be run. So that's useful for kind of diagnosing or optimizing a query that's being constructed through a query builder, or any query builder really. All right, so we've joined our join, we've selected, we've still got to do our where to constrain this to this. I can't talk. User ID, user ID. So what this will do is I'm going to select from this table. I'm going to constrain that where I only want the rows in that table matching the user ID I'm passing in. Once I have that kind of culled down, I'm going to join on channels based on that ID relationship, and then I'm going to select from that result set only the channel properties. So I'll get raw results here that are our channels. Now, let's go ahead and bring in our channel model. So here, I'm going to want to construct our channel instances. So this is where we might, we might consider some refactor action very soon. Something I like to do a lot of the time is I'll add like a static method from record. And the purpose of this is to basically do this logic of taking a raw record from the database and returning an instance of the object. So it's kind of doing the reverse mapping from a database row to an object instance. So if I wrote this here, then we would replace these with like record.id, record.rid, record.owner, and return the instance. And then I could come back here and do channel from record, and then it's going to be this channel object here. And I don't need any of this code, right? And I can do the same refactor everywhere. So I could say here, return that. And here, this could be even shorter or shortened. There's map. You can even shorten this further and be like, okay, there. here I'll return channel from record channel. You may come back through here and rename this variable. I might call this record instead later. But I don't have to do that now. That's like a, you know, we can do that over time. Something I'm noticing is this ID needs to get set on this channel instance, and it's not part of record. So let's think a little bit. The pragmatist in me says just set it here and move on, because it's a one-off on creates. The purist is like, okay, well, I'm going to add an ID prop here, an ID dependency, and then you'd have everything. But let's stick with this for right now. If this were Postgres, then I could do something like this, I think. And when we do the insert, instead of just getting back an ID, we would get back like the full object, and then that would be the record we would insert. Alternatively, we could also just run another query to get back that channel, and it would include the ID. But again, this is much more pragmatic, so we'll just go this way. So we've done this refactor. We don't have any tests. Let's go make sure this shit still works. It does, or seems like it does. So let's grab the birds ID. That's good. Okay, so that's good. We've got an error there. So cannot set ID, property ID of undefined. So let's do this number and run it again. Of course. Okay, cannot set property ID of undefined. So that makes sense, right? Like, this code channel won't exist because we're creating it from scratch. So what we'll do instead is create a new object and pass that in and kind of glom on the ID to that. So this takes the current channel and explodes it. So wait, this won't work. This isn't gonna work at all. Because again, we don't have this channel yet. So this needs ID, rid, and owner. Let's just do that. So ID, rid, owner, name, right? And we'll go with this for now. This should work. It only took 3 animals of whack channels to figure it out, but now we have it. Okay, so now we're back in order. We've got this from record method on the channel. We pop back over to the channel membership. Now we've got the same data that's part of that channel record. And if we want to return channels, like channel instances, then all we have to do is say channels map channel from record. And now this should return those list of channel instances that we can call instance methods on and play around with. So what we need to do is go ahead and wire up our endpoint for that. So I can't remember if we created one already, but I think we did. So yeah, API me/channels is going to be where we actually list the channels at. So this will be, oh yeah, we've already got a response schema set up, so we're going to return an array of channels. So this will be in the me controller on the channels function. So we'll search for me. There's our channels function. We're going to return an array, but the first thing will be const channels equals await channel membership dot by user res dot locals dot user ID, right? And then here we still have to remember to do that whole channel to JSON explicit mapping, because I didn't take a look at this at all last night. So with any luck, we should be able to add this request. So list, say join channels. List channels let's join channels. Overthinking this a little bit. It's also getting late, so like my brain is turning off. All right, so we'll send a GET request. Immediately not found. What is that? What is that? So spec says API me channels. API me channels. Oh, we've got this extra API me that we don't need. So we must have, when we prefixed the server or whatever here, we must have forgotten to take it off of that endpoint. So API/API/me/channels existed. All right, so we've done this again. This needs to be a static async function. I set a breakpoint there, but I don't know why, but that's okay. We at least get to see what's in the database, what came back from the database. So it's all of our channel fields. And now we see a list of channels. So if I want to go, we'll get all channels again. I want to join animals of whack. Join. And now I list join channels. There it is. So this is pretty huge. If I want to leave a channel, do that, and then list, and it falls off. So that's a pretty important piece of functionality for building a Slack clone, is to be able to join and leave channels. And this table is going to get used for a whole ton of things. So like imagine, you're the infamous @here in a channel. Whenever we implement our message API, there's going to be a chunk of code that needs to find all the users in a channel so that it can send them all a notification that something has happened. So yeah, this relationship of users to channels is going to get used quite a bit. So let's see, what else do we have to do tonight? I don't think we need to do anything else. We need to commit, but that's it. So drag this over. Let's get everything committed straight. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. We don't need it. All right. So we'll get our migration in place. add table that associates that stores what channels a user is in. Then we made our models changes. Support join leave features on the user model, and refactor channels to use a from record factory method. We'll end up wanting to do the same thing on the user object. If for no other reason, consistency. But I'm also a big fan of like put off a lot of that stuff until you feel the pain. On the channel side, we felt the pain, like this need here to do this mapping from the database in this collaborating object was the step too far for me to, like, I didn't want to duplicate that same instantiation logic again, because think we had a new field, now we've got to do it in the channel function or channel object, but also over here. So people talk about, you know, this 0, 1, or many rule, where it's like either don't do it, you do it as a one-off, or you abstract for the ... case. I'm more of like a 0, 1, 2, 3, but 4 is too much, or many. So that gives you a little more wiggle room to, you know, not just blindly follow a rule, but to build some kind of nuance in there. All right, so let's keep on committing. So then this was just adding REST API endpoints for joining, leaving channels, and listing current user channels. Right, so we'll push all this up. Take a look at it. Let's see. Get a left join. I forget what else we did, but it's really just about linking to the docs for now. Files changed. Got migration. Here's something else. Like we're creating a lot of migrations for every single change we make. You know, especially like this is where we're adding a field and indexing a column. In practice, you'd probably just make this one migration. So it's like one migration attached to the feature that you're merging in. And that's more appropriate. But for learning purposes and demonstration to people that would come into this project, I like the idea of just creating as many migrations as we can, just to demonstrate the concept as many times as we can, so people can pick that up. By the way, if you ever have a merge conflict on this YAML, it is a fucking nightmare. So try as best as you can to, if you're using this to build out and design your APIs, it's almost worth having, if you have like 3 developers who are going to work on 3 different parts of the API, get them all together to agree on some of these contracts, work together on getting that committed to the project, and then base their work after that point. Because it is a nightmare to make all this stuff work. Especially when we're now post-COVID, it's an asynchronous world, and you know your buddy's not sitting across the cube or across the hall from you. Yeah. So like I said, I'm still not completely sold on this is where this feature or this functionality should land. I just can't think of a good word that would have it land in the channel membership object cleanly. But, as I'm going to sleep tonight, it'll be on my mind and I'll be thinking about it, and then maybe something clicks, or maybe it can stay exactly where it is, and it's fine. I do like it on the user object a lot more than on the channel object. It just feels better to me for some reason. Yeah, so that's everything for this. We'll go ahead and merge this in. Let's look at the project board one more time before we close out the stream and line up tomorrow's work. So what I had gone ahead and thrown on the backlog was, let's go ahead and start creating our messaging API. So the ability to create messages, or send, receive messages, edit and delete messages. So all the CRUD options around that. I think that'd be a cool line of work to do. But we do have some things that have kind of, some other things we could be working on. So this composition function, that'll be front-end plumbing that we can't do until we have kind of a fully featured API. So we'll push that. WebSockets, we're going to push. This is going to be a lot easier than I kind of thought it would be. But I almost want to have kind of a dumb implementation using, like, I think in here I'd put, like, people are going to have to refresh the page to see new messages, or maybe the front end does long polling, or like it just polls every 30 seconds or something like that for new messages. This will be kind of a layer on top of that once we have a solid foundation for sending and receiving messages with a poor UX, we'll use WebSockets, we'll sprinkle that in a bit to help create more of that real-time user experience. But we're still going to need all these APIs to be able to do that. Yeah, a lot of these other things we'll group into kind of a odds and ends stream. We'll keep the momentum rolling and work on this tomorrow. And I think, if you have channels, you can join leave channels and you can send messages to those channels. That's enough of kind of that's your 80-20. That's enough of functionality for us to start pivoting towards, let's start actually building out our front end and using these APIs and playing around with it without having to use Insomnia and log into our database to see those changes. So that'll be nice. But anyway, yeah, so I'll be back tomorrow around same time. Tonight was a little bit of a late stream because I had some other things I was working on, but tomorrow should be around the normal 9 to 10 Eastern time. Anyway, I guess last things. If you're watching these I'm streaming all these to Twitch around that time. I export the VODs to YouTube, and all of that's linked in like the README and all that. If you're looking at this on YouTube and you ever have questions about, something or other, feel free. I think my email is on my GitHub profile, but feel free to open a discussion on the repo with whatever question you have, or even if it's something not even about WAC, it's just like a development discussion. Feel free to open it here and we can chat. My email's on my GitHub profile. Feel free to email me. I'm on Twitter. But yeah, I'd love for this to kind of, not just be about, let's be real, no one gives a shit about a Slack clone. This isn't going to be some real project that's out there in the wild, although I did buy whack.chat, the domain, so we'll probably deploy this at some point. But I really want this to be more of an opportunity for people that are either breaking into development or web development to see kind of the process from start to finish. Have an example app they can kind of draw some inspiration from as far as how it's structured or like different methodologies or whatever. But even if you've got experience and you're seeing these things and you want to just talk to someone else, I want it to be a platform for that as well. So anyway, yeah, so it's 1:38 in the morning. I'm going to roll out of here. I will see y'all tomorrow.